Well, good morning. It is good to see you all. You know that this is the fourth and last Sunday of our celebration of Creationtide. That's our celebration of God's good creation and our place in it. Now, you know, by the way, that next week Mary Jacobs will be preaching. Mary Jacobs will preach a good sermon. This will be worth hearing. She's currently doing the interim pastorate in Medford, and I'm delighted that she's willing to come up and preach here. She, in fact, wrote us an offer and said, hey, how would you like? Which I thought was neat. Now, I do need to tell you that immediately following Mary Jacobs, we start into a series of sermons on the book of Job, which is a cool book. That's a great book of the Bible. The first sermon is on the first chapter, which is about Satan. So you may want to put that on your calendar. So you remember that we have done Creationtide. Now, if you've been paying attention, you are aware that the author, Diana Butler Bass, whose book Grounded provides the outline for this celebration, has written herself into a corner. So the first Sunday, we talked about dirt and how you could connect with God through dirt. And then Karen talked about water, how we could connect with God through water. Then I got a sky. So you can connect with God in all kinds of places out there. Why would you bother with the church? If you can connect with God out there, what are you doing in here? It is a little bit of a tight corner, isn't it? Well, this morning is about roots. You know that here in the Northwest, there are 3 of the tallest species of trees in the world: the redwood, the sequoia, and the Sitka spruce. Did you know that the tallest redwood has been measured at 377 feet tall? What is that, like 30 stories? The tallest sequoia at 306 feet, and the tallest Sitka spruce at 270 feet. Wow, those are immense, immense trees. Have you been to the whole rainforest on the west side of the Olympic National Park? That's worth seeing. They get over 300 inches of rain a year. Take your raincoat. But they have these Sitka spruce that are just incredible. You also know that these are silly trees. Now, if you were 300 feet tall, what would your root system look like? If I was 300 feet tall, I'd have a really deep root system. But these species of trees don't. In fact, they seldom go below 6 feet. That's crazy. A wind comes up and they just go right over, especially if the ground is wet. You know why they have survived? Because they interlock their roots. They sink their roots into the roots of each other, and they are bound together. That is how they withstand the storm. I've often thought that people were like those trees. We need those roots sunk into the lives of one another. Hey, I got a really cool Christmas present. Joanne gave it to me. It was the gift of having my DNA sequenced, which was really fun because I spit into a test tube and mailed it off. And it turns out that my DNA is most like the people who live in Western Europe, the French and the Germans. That was a surprise. Didn't see that coming. It turns out my second commonality is with the people of Ireland. I didn't see that coming. Nobody has ever talked about Ireland. And then the third was Southern England, which I really thought was going to be first. One of the things that's missing is that we know that there was a Cherokee woman who married into the family at the beginning of the 19th century. And I expected that my DNA was going to show some commonality with Native Americans. Turns out there's none. Zero. Not a trace. Well, you know, this is more than just idle curiosity. We all want to know where we came from. We all want to know who we are. We want to know where our roots lie. You know, we're living in a pretty rootless society. I said rootless, not ruthless. You know, in the past centuries, it was common for extended families to live close together, to help one another, to help raise the children. That doesn't happen much anymore. You know, the average American moves once every 5 years. It's hard to put down roots. Even more interesting to me is the death of our institutions. You know that after 12 years, Troop 872, our Boy Scout troop, closed down. They did not close down because they couldn't get any boys to join. They had boys. They just couldn't get any adult men to commit. You know, they're not the only institution in trouble. There's the same problem with the Masons and the Elks and the church. Everybody is having trouble getting people to commit. We don't really want to put down roots. And then there's the matter of Sherry Turkle's new book. How many of you watch TED Talks? Yeah, a few of us. Are you familiar with Sherry Turkle? I would encourage you to look her up. In the late 90s, Sherry Turkle did a TED Talk on the wonders of the electronic age and how wonderful it was going to be when we were all hooked up to the internet. Well, she's just written a new one where she says, well, maybe not. In fact, she's just written a book called Reclaiming Conversation, where she makes an interesting point. She says, you and I are addicted to our screens. Our phones, our tablets, our computers. We are addicted. And that we are exchanging real relationships for virtual ones. Have you been to the mall and noticed the young people walking around the mall in groups all looking at their phones? What is that? Or have you seen couples in restaurants? They aren't talking to each other, they're looking at their phones. You know, every Wednesday, the staff of this congregation goes out to lunch together. We go to Juan, Colorado, they've got us. Their special is the fajita quesadilla. You know, and as much as we like each other, and as much as we have to say to each other, there's always somebody checking their phone. We are exchanging we're exchanging real relationships for virtual ones. And what concerns Sherry Turkle the most about this is that it's in face-to-face conversation that we learn empathy, how to understand how other people feel, how our words affect them. You see, virtual relationships are too easy. You can say whatever you want. And in fact, that's what's happening People are saying what they want without regard to how it makes the other person feel. We're losing the capacity for empathy. Roots. About a generation ago, I'm a fan of Oliver Sacks, who just died, who once remarked that he didn't believe it was possible for our civilization to be destroyed in one generation until he saw an iPod. Now, take out the word iPod, because those aren't being made anymore, and substitute the word iPhone. What happens when we as a civilization lose the ability to be empathetic, to put down roots in each other's lives? What happens? Recently, the Hartford Research Institute released a really interesting study about megachurches. Which are popping up all over the place. A megachurch is a church with more than 2,000 present on Sunday morning. And they are popping up all over America at the same time that the actual number of people who go to church is dropping. They're growing. They wanted to know why people were drawn to those megachurches in such numbers. You know what the answer is? Because you can be anonymous. You can go and fill up a theater seat and enjoy the show, and nobody will ever ask your name or ask you to contribute or teach the first grade Sunday school class. You can go for years and be anonymous. And that's attractive to people, which strikes me as being rootless. Why would you want to belong to a church when you didn't want to set down roots? Which raises a pretty interesting question for me. So if that's why people join really big churches, why would anybody want to join this church? Why are you here? Because you know that at the bigger church, there's better preaching. They've got a bigger pipe organ, if they have an organ. You know that they have better programs and a wider variety of programs. What are you doing here? Well, I think the answer is exactly the opposite to why people join big churches. You're here because you can't be anonymous. You're here because people will ask your name, because people will be interested in what's going on in your life. That's why you're here. And you know, sinking the roots of your life into the roots of other people isn't just good for your emotional well-being. It's also how you connect with God. And you know that when we sing something really well, that there is an energy there that is beyond us. That there is a presence. You know that when we gather together and share our deepest concerns and our prayer requests, and when we pray together, that there is something powerful about that. You know that it's in community where we have roots that we experience the presence of God. There's a passage, it's Psalm 133. How very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. It's like the precious oil on the head, running down upon the beard of Aaron, running down over the collar of his robes. It's like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion, for there the Lord ordained his blessing, life evermore. Boy, when the church does things right, it's beautiful. When we welcome, it's beautiful. When we forgive, it's beautiful. When we work together, when we are concerned, it's beautiful. But you know, the church really isn't the place where discouraging words are never heard. You know, if you've been around the church any length of time at all, you know that belonging to a church is tough business. Because the preacher will say something that you find offensive. Somebody will say something behind your back about you that will hurt. The church will make a decision that you can't support. Think about what's happened regarding the ordination of gays and gay marriage in the church in the last generation. Sometimes being part of a church is tough. And it'd be lots easier in those times to go worship at the First Church of Starbucks. Or to worship at the Chapel of the Inner Springs. It'd be easy to walk away from this old, tottering institution. That's why I find this passage from Matthew 18 to be so interesting. I want you to listen because there are 3 different thoughts combined in this passage. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the 2 of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take 1 or 2 others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Did you hear the 3 thoughts? The first is about what to do when another member of the church does something that's hurtful to you. First, you go and talk to them alone. Second, you take 2 or 3 witnesses from the church. Third, if there's still no reconciliation, you bring it up before the church. And if they still won't listen, you throw them out. Isn't that interesting? First is this process. Second is the authority of the church. Did you hear it? If you're thrown out of the church on earth, you're not getting into heaven. You know, I'm not sure I want that kind of power and authority. But the third one. The third one's the most interesting to me because what is it doing with the other 2? For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. You know what that's about? That's about what happens when you stick it out in the church. When you sink your roots into the church, into the lives of other people. This is about what happens when you can look past the troubles that the church can cause you. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of you. That's what happens when we stick it out with the church, when we sink our roots. Christ is present in our midst. And you know that's true. You've had that experience as we have come to the Lord's table, as we have shared coffee and cookies out in the narthex, as we have written cards, as we've made phone calls, as we've tried to help, as we have tried to work together. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of you. You know, I know about roots and how hard it can be to sink them into any place. Life is easier and simpler if you don't have any roots. Because when you sink your roots, all of a sudden you have to care about that other person. You have to care about finances of the church. You have to care about others. If you're rootless, you don't have to. But we experience God in a special way when we do sink our roots. And you know, when we have sunk our roots into each other's lives, we can stand together against the storms of life. We can stand together. Would you pray with me? Gracious God, roots are hard. Roots are scary. But roots are one of the ways that we experience you. So give us courage. In the name of Christ. Amen.